Hey everyone, Riley's Productions here. Just a quick update on what we're doing at the shop today. Doing a T56 Magnum trans swap on the 73 Cuda. It's up on jack stands. We don't have our 2-post lift yet. We were having a bunch of issues last year at Big Willow doing 120 on the main straight. Fourth gear was popping out and it was unsafe, so we decided to pull the trans out on the Cuda that's been in here since 2013, I think, when we first installed it. We're having a bunch of issues throughout the years. Even before last year, before 2019, 2018, 2017, the clutch would always drop to the floor, and I figured that it was either the clutch was going bad or the hydraulic release bearing was going bad or the lines were getting heated up. So we just decided to pull the trans, like I said, and install all brand new stuff. We have a new single disc ceramic clutch and new hydraulic release bearing and new trans and all that. So we're all going to swap it in. I didn't find out until right now the issue why the fourth gear was popping out, and I'll show you guys real quick. Here's the what happened was the pilot bearing got chewed all this shit, and the input shaft ate the I think there's needles inside. I can't even tell anymore. They're gone. They're just disintegrated, and that was the reason why our the reason why our brake fluid is all black like this, and not the normal golden clear fluid that comes out when you put fresh brake fluid into the clutch. I thought it was just the lines, like I said, getting overheated by the transmission in the engine or the headers or something, and I just covered up with this heat protective barrier stuff. But it really was the input shaft which ground down the bearing that was inside that pilot bearing. So if you can check, here is a groove, and it had cut into the input shaft, and this is the pieces of bearing that was left behind. Yeah, so it just tore it up. Now, if you compare that to a brand new input shaft on a T56 Magnum, look, it's super smooth, no grooves at all. So the real reason why the input shaft did that to the pilot bearing was because I was a dumbass, and I'll admit it. I didn't correctly balance and make sure the bell housing was parallel. These QuickTime bell housings are super strong, but they're not too accurate from the factory, from QuickTime. They just weld them up, and it's not always concentric or parallel, or I forget the term, but it's not always centered correctly from the factory from QuickTime. So if you slap on a T56 Magnum, which they recommended back in 2013 when I first got the trans, I had called them to see how to proper procedure to make sure it was offset correctly and center it. Tremec had recommended at the time to just slap it on and just go. And years later, people have found out that you have to add shims to first make the bell housing parallel when you rotate the flywheel, and then make sure it's indexed to see if you need like offset dowels to make sure the transmission is centered onto the pilot bearing or bushing. So yeah, you yanked out the old transmission. This trans is actually still pretty good. It's been running since, like I said, 2013, almost 7 years of just beating on the car, track days and whatnot. And we actually have driven this transmission for the last, I think, 4 or 5 years to Big Willow and back on the street, 360 miles each way, so that's like about 720 miles each way. And the shifting, it's never really caused us an issue on the highway. Only when we were really beating on it, hammering it down at Big Willow, doing 120, where fourth gear was popping out. And that was because there was no pilot bushing to center the input shaft within the trans. There's just too much vibration, and I'm guessing that it caused the fourth gear to pop out. So in order to remedy all this, we got a pilot bushing this time, which has no bearings, nothing to chew out, a brand new T56 Magnum. This was the Cuda spare anyways. I'm going to have this one rebuilt, sent out and rebuilt, and use it as a mock-up and as a spare. It's still pretty good, but I just want to get it refreshed. But we're going to throw this brand new one in. We're going to replace the hydraulic release bearing with a tilt-in unit, because I like their products. They make some really good stuff, made in USA. We're going to throw in a brand new ceramic disc and a McLeod clutch. It's kind of a shame though, the previous single disc clutch ceramic disc is in pretty good shape still. The material is still pretty thick and not much too different from the brand new. The thickness is pretty much comparable, so it's kind of a shame that we can't reuse this, but just for safety's sake, I'm going to throw on a brand new one. And then we're going to have the flywheel. The flywheel is still pretty darn flat, no grooves or nothing in the wears. Looks pretty good. So we just wipe this down, and we're going to have it sent out and resurfaced, and probably cut it down to a lightweight just to lose some pounds, but it's still pretty good. So we're going to send that out. But in any case, that's what we're doing. So I just need to figure out a way to get out the pilot bearing out. I tried the bread trick and even used some high performance wheat bread, but it's still stuck in there. I may have to drill it out. But in any case, the lesson learned here is to always make sure your bell housing is parallel first, and then index correctly to the trans. There's a whole procedure on it on YouTube. There's better videos out there. I'd love to make a video of how to do it, but I just don't have the time, because we have a track day that's coming up really fast and have to slap everything together and break it in. So I just don't have the time. But I will do the proper procedure for this transmission as well as the 73 Challenger build, and I'm going to document that, and I'll make a video of that. But like I said, unfortunately I don't have the time. Hopefully I remember where all the bolts go. Actually, I forgot where everything goes, but we'll figure it out. That's the fun of it. So I was able to get the pilot bearing out of the crankshaft on the Cuda's engine, and this is what's left of it. I'll show you guys an up-close picture. I had to Swiss cheese the fucker and hit it out with a chisel, and it popped out eventually. But this is what happened. So the input shaft was wiggling around, and it pushed the bearing itself out, and all the needles and the needle roller needles fell out on this side towards the inside of the crankshaft. Since the input shaft had pushed it in, this portion in, this metal lip thing here is supposed to be tucked in to the bearing itself, and it got pushed out by the input shaft. So when I tried the bread trick, it blocked all the bread to expand behind the bearing, and it wasn't able to push it out. So My only recourse was first I tried a bearing puller. That didn't work because this lip was blocking the inside. The puller wasn't able to catch on. It was too far deep. So my only other recourse is to luckily drill it out, which is not recommended because there's a high instance you might nick the crank and damage it. So it's not really recommended, but I had no choice in this instance. Luckily, I didn't damage the crank, and I was able to, like I said, chisel the rest of it out. And I drilled about 6 holes. And anyways, it was a pain in the ass. This is why we don't recommend running a pilot bearing anymore. There's just too much stuff to go wrong. The needles pop out. It's just the roller bearings just popped out, and if there is a imbalance on your transmission, it's not the way to go. What we recommend is a pilot bushing, and like this sintered oilite bronze bushing that we're going to use for the Cuda's new transmission. We're going to use one as well for the Challenger. We sell these. They're specifically made for the T56 Magnum, the GM version, and I think it's the way to go. So we're going to button it all up, get it installed. Hopefully this transmission swap goes in pretty smoothly. But that's it for now. We'll see you guys later. Wireless Productions. See you at the track.